Yes, sir. We can start.
All right. So, good morning to you, to all of you, and welcome to this special talk to name the way by Professor Loulin Huang from the Auckland Technical University, New Zealand. It is my great pleasure, my privilege, and honor indeed to welcome and introduce our guest resource this morning, Professor Loulin Huang from Auckland Technical University. And I must thank Professor Young for sparing his very valuable time with us and accepting my request. And also, I would like to welcome another senior faculty from Auckland Technical University, Professor Sarat Singamani, my very good friend and a former colleague in the Middle East when we taught in the Sultanate, and who is largely responsible for this event happening today. So, my thanks indeed to Professor Sarat for being with us this morning.
My pleasure.
Well, uh, at a time when boundaries are fast disappearing in the context of learning disciplines, with an interdisciplinary and a multidisciplinary approach being the order of the day, we here at DG Vaishnav College, MA English Department, we have made a significant departure from convention. The normal practice being we invite resource with proven expertise in the field of humanities to address us on a range of topics. But today we have a novel, a great change. We have someone from a pure science background, an engineer who has a great interest in literature. And that by itself is a very keen point of interest, of a viewpoint of interest. Uh, in fact, it was a chance meeting a couple of years back when we had these two professors, Professor Loulin and Professor Sarat at IIT Madras, to attend a conference. My friend Sarat invited me over, which he normally does when he visits India. So that was the time when I met Professor Hong, and then came to know about his enormous interest in literature. Of course, he has a proven science background, but it was quite surprising for me when I was the only person from the humanities department to be in the midst of so many engineers. I was indeed surprised by his very keen interest in literature and his interest in Chinese writers and the Western influence on Chinese writers, as well as his acquaintance with the Indian classics, the Gita, for instance. So, it is here that I would actually express my thanks to Professor Hong for accepting my request to be here. And in fact, it set me thinking even then, why not have Professor Hong address us? And so I put forth the request, which was immediately accepted. And that is how it is all happening today. So my profound thanks indeed to both these professors for making it happen and turn into a reality. And before I know, we are all anxious to listen to Professor Hung, but before that, a few details related to Professor Hung's academic experience and his motivation. Loulin Huang is an associate professor in mechatronics in Auckland University of Technology, New Zealand. And he has about 40 years experience in the research and teaching in the areas of mechatronics and robotics with a purely interdisciplinary flavor. The topics covered include system modeling, state estimation, planning, control and real-time implementation essential for the design and operation of mechatronic and robotic systems found in a wide range of industrial applications. Apart from active research in applied engineering, Professor Huang takes a lot of interest in literature, history, and the convergence amongst science, mathematics, and philosophical thought. So with these a few words of introduction to Professor Huang, let me once again express my sincere thanks on behalf of myself and my department to Professor Huang and to Professor Sarath for being here and sparing their valuable time. It's here that then I would request Professor Huang to take over proceedings. And kindly note, the lecture will be on for about 40 to 45 minutes, and in the remaining 15 minutes, Professor Huang will take questions.
Thanks, Dr. Marie Ganan, and thanks so much for your good words. And I have also thanked my friend, colleague, Professor Sarat, to introduce me to this opportunity to share some of my thoughts and observation regarding science, engineering, literature, history. First of all, when I received requests from Sarah, asked me to give a talk to students who specialize in English literature, so I get a little bit nervous because I think it's a well-known story. You know, one person want to show his knowledgeable, want to show off his knowledgeable. Normally, he want to speak something which, you know, is beyond the scope of the audience. For example, I have one friend. He's an English engineering program student, but I know a little bit of Russians. So when he meet a person whose background is English literature, he start to talk about the Russians and even speak Russians, so that the audience cannot understand him and admire him. So I have such an ego. So I think, oh, you want me to speak to the student whose area is English literature, so maybe I can talk about the science, engineering, robotics, Jacobian, you know, inverse kinematics, forward kinematics, even Hilbert space, etc., etc. So I'm facing dilemma. So I think today I am such a situation. So I need to talk about something about English literature history, and to get leave my ego behind. So I cannot exclusively just focus on the area I'm familiar with. To me, English literature or Chinese literature history is my hobby. I'm fully aware of the gap between a hobby and the professions. So having said that, so I really open for your criticism if something I say is not so acceptable or something's wrong from your professional point of view. Also, I want this session become informal, open. You can stop me anytime you want and ask me any question you want to ask. Now, the title is To Name the Way. Actually, these several words come to my mind on the very famous sentence in the Chinese classics. 道德经. So I think most of you may know, I think this the Chinese classics has been around for maybe more than 3,000 years, maybe 2,600 years, produced at the same time when Gita was produced. Even now, many scholars dedicated lifetime to study the link between these two classics. One is the foundation of Chinese Taoism. I think one is the foundation of Indian Hinduism. Yeah. The first sentence, the opening address of Dao De Jing is, the way that can be named is not the eternal way. So I borrow this sentence to be the title of today's topic. Actually, the Dao De Jing opening address just expressed the frustration of the, this greatest thinker, Lao Tzu. I don't know how to. Many Western people know Confucius, and Lao Tzu is another great thinker. Even older, he was older than Confucius. Actually, Confucius has met Lao Tzu for a short time. Two of them have a dialogue. Yeah. Actually, this shows Lao Tzu's insight. The limit of our human language to describe the truth. In the Western philosophy, like Plato or Socrates, I think they get absolute truth. In terms of religions, it's God. But so if something can be easily described with our layman's language, with high possibility, what they describe is not truth, is not the nature. I think this idea also pick up on the 20th century's philosopher like Wittgenstein. I think Wittgenstein has the similar idea. So what he say, the limits of my language mean the limits of my word. Okay, I think this is what he say. I think he has another very famous say is, whereof one cannot speak, it's better for him to be silent. I don't know whether we need to be so pessimistic. Yeah. Why a human language, I think, is powerless to describe the absolute truth. So, in terms of the philosophy of Lao Tzu, as expressed by Dao De Jing, the real absolute truth doesn't need a language, doesn't need a words. The words are useless. Useless. I think the same words can be found in Gita. I think Gita, was written roughly 500 BC, similar to Dao De Jing. Dao De Jing is in the way of a poem. It's a very beautiful literature piece. For me, it's a beautiful Chinese classical literature. So concise, so compact. They only have 66, I think how many? Roughly 80 short paragraph, roughly 80. Gita may be a little bit longer. Gita is in the way of a dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. Before the on the warfield, before a great war would start. So it's in a way of dialogue. So in a different way, roughly have 700 verses. So I take out some words from Gita. Gita says, he who knows the Brahmin talks not. He who talks knows not the Brahmin. So I think it's one-to-one mapping between Dao De Jing and the Gita. There are so many similarities between these two classics. So today's topic is, are we able to describe the word, to name the way? I think to name the way here, if using our scientific language, how to describe the word? If we follow the classics teachings, it seems no way. Yeah, no way. I think even this idea not just reflected in Tao Te Ching or Gita. Look at the Greek philosophers, Socrates. Socrates once said, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. The more you learn, the more you think you know nothing. So this is like a paradox. It's a very deep philosophy implication. I think it's really true. A person become more knowledgeable, he will feel more strongly he know nothing. I think I have a strong feeling when I study mathematics. The more I study mathematics, the more I found I know the things I know become less and less in numbers. So eventually, I say I just concentrate on one or two concepts, like a zero number. So I see, if a person understands zero, he may understand 90% of mathematics. So the more I talk, the more sure this guy is not knowledgeable. So I have strong feeling that the wisdom in Gita and the Tao Te Ching are really very true. Okay.
My apologies for interrupting. Dr. Muraliganam, if you switch off your microphone, some disturbance is coming in between. Yeah, sorry for disturbing.
You know, these feelings, I believe also in Wittgenstein. I believe you guys should know this great philosophy in the 20th centuries. Surely they have Ludwig in Germany. Sometimes he uses very sarcastic words to describe the power, language to be powerless. They say, philosophy is just a byproduct of misunderstanding language. He despises the ordinary philosophy. And he even say, when the line starts to talk, normally the line doesn't talk. He said, luckily the line doesn't talk. An animal doesn't talk. Imagine if the line open mouth and start to talk. Then we start to not be able to understand it. I found his comment is very incisive, very, very powerful, very powerful. And so you may wonder, if there's no way to describe the word, so what's the point? What's the point we study language? What's the point we study English? What's the point we study Chinese or study a lot of the mathematics, physics, or other subjects? So now I'm considering a mathematic concept. Name it. You know, as human beings, we have inherent deficiency, to describe the word, because our language is very inefficient. I think very powerless to describe the word. On the one hand side, the word is infinite. I think there's one photo really impact me very much. The NASA, the they launch explorer to the outer space. And before this explorer exists, the space which are acceptable to human beings. And NASA turned the camera pointing to the Earth. The size of the Earth, just 1 pixel. 1 pixel of the image. 1 pixel only. So this means this is the minimum unit in an image. This is the size of the Earth. Okay? So the word is infinite. There are 2 meanings. One is a physical shape, physical appearance. But the more is the principles behind, the running, the operation of the word. I think this is the main motivation of so many religions. Because religion for me like a container. I think our human beings are very good in finding excuse. If I don't know anything, I need to find excuse. So I don't know how the world is running. So I threw all this unknown to the container and leaving God to answer this. Okay? So the infinity, I think, is the main one of the feature of the word. But our life is finite, limit, specific, very concrete, tangible existence. So in our own domain, we need to find something, approximate, approximate the true description of the truth. Because when Gita or Lao Tzu say the true meaning is nothing, no language, formless, I think what he mentioned actually, from my understanding, is the powerless, useless, or inefficiency of our languages. Can we find some language which can approximate the level which, in the mind of these great thinkers, like Socrates, Wittgenstein, Plato, let alone Lao Tzu, and Gita, Krishna. Yeah. I think we have this capability. So this is my first issue here is all of us should realize the limit, deficiency of our language. Luckily, such a deficiency created many jobs. For example, because of a deficiency of a language, we have writers. We have a degree program for training English, writing, speaking, right? This is why you come to this college to study English, because you have a job after graduation. If anybody can speak language with Western, with a perfect structure, there's no right. There's no writer. We don't need a writer. We don't need a philosopher. So can you see the meaning of no here? No here actually means something perfect. This is my understanding of what the Gita and the Lao say in the words. Normally, if something approximates no, they will map into another one, full, perfect. I have this feeling because of my mathematical training. I have mentioned this number, 0. 0 from the common sense means no. But the big question mark. As Indians, you must be proud. 0 was invented by your ancestor. 0 was invented by Indians. Sometimes I think, why? It were Indians to invent 0. I believe it's because of the culture. Like a Gita, similar to Dao De Jing's, they always focus something impotence. I think impotence is also the concept in Buddhism, because I know Buddhism and Hinduism. Buddhism was developed out of Hinduism, and I believe when Indians invented zero, the concept of impotence was introduced. Because impotence, you cannot understand on the surface. Impotence actually mapping infinite. Like a zero. Regardless of how big number. No, just a minute. Regardless how small number, for example, 10 to the minus 9, it's very small, right? This means it's 0.00000. I don't know how many. Once they divide by 0, it becomes infinite. So this is a limit concept. Because 0 can push everything to the limit. I think it's the modern mathematics foundations. If anybody wants to appreciate the modern mathematics, he needs to understand this concept very well. So I'll give you another example. Why such duality, such beautiful mapping from zero, impotence to infinite, can be used to describe the world. So this means I say we can use our human language to approximate such a state. So my second example, hopefully you can appreciate this example. This roundabout, I think the roundabout is important traffic control systems. So you have a car move around roundabout. If I say, from our everyday life language, the vehicle can move because there are force pushing it to tangent directions. I think this is the concept of Aristotle, even before Archimedes. They say any motion, you need a force. This means velocity cannot be produced without a force. This is one thing. Okay? These concepts have existed, I think, maybe several thousand years in the human being's history. This is a good example to show the prowess, efficiency of our common sense, intuition. I think that our common language has other property, intuitive, superficial. Okay, superficial. This concept has been destroyed by Newton. Newton said it's wrong. You don't need a force to maintain velocity. Okay, this is all because Newton. But anyway, before Newton, Galileo and other scientists. So what the concept is, they just changed the concept. They introduced the key words change. They just add one more word, change of velocity. You need a force. This means if there's no force, 0, the velocity can maintain forever. I think this is the biggest contribution from Newton mechanics, the concept called inertia. So when you talk about a change, you cannot talk about, if you talk about a change, you cannot avoid zero. If you avoid zero, your understanding of change is very, very superficial, not to the standard. So Newton keep it further. You know, from the common sense change, they introduce instantaneous, I think instant change, or instantaneous change. This means the time for the change close to zero. Otherwise, your understanding of change is very superficial. So that's why he introduced instantaneous acceleration concepts. You know, the A actually equal to the change of velocity over the change, the time taken for change. Then you assume can you appreciate such instantaneous change is the foundation of the modern mechanics, not modern, and before Einstein, the mechanics before Einstein. Einstein normally, Einstein mechanics is called modern mechanics. People say Newton's mechanics is classical mechanics. So if you really want to appreciate the classical mechanics, you need to understand what meaning zero. For example, zero you cannot observe on the Earth. Can you tell me, anybody can tell me what's the meaning zero? Time duration. Anybody can tell me? Can you experience zero? There's no way to do that. So this concept is the foundation of the advanced mathematics branch, calculus. Calculus actually is mathematics of change, math of change. Here I can say so. Before calculus, all the mathematical language are static, intuitive. You know, the language of this, elementary mathematics is very superficial on the surface. Okay? So can you appreciate, you know, the deficiency of the common language? This is actually refer the language named by Lao Tzu. You know, the way which can be named by what? You know, Chinese classics is very compact, and also the subject to different interpretation. You know, for these single words, I believe there are thousands of different type of interpretations. This is another way of Chinese philosophy. Chinese philosophy is develop this concept, simplicity and impotence, or leaving space for you to think. If you look at a Chinese painting has a very, very important technique called the Liu Bai. Liu Bai means, for example, you have this Chinese painting. They want to show the spring is coming. What he showed is just here is a willow branch, and this the water, some ducks, and pool enjoying. Then this whole area empty. Because Chinese language is graphic, poetic. Not too much on symbolic or text meanings. So the imagination, so once you become zero, what happened? You will have infinite interpretations, infinite imaginations. So once you become zero, you introduce infinite. So this exactly, once you introduce zero, you produce calculus. And Newton realized these concepts, then he produced the classical mechanics. And this classical mechanics still being used today. Okay, this is one example. Second one is, there are two questions here. I believe you drive car every day. So when you drive along this circle, so from your common sense, the force must along the velocity here, but in reality, the force is along this line. You may question why this happened, especially for the uniform circular motion. So what's meaning uniform circular motion means that its velocity is constant, right? This velocity, no, this speed is constant. Speed is constant. So the speed is constant. Then you have another question, because you learned the classical mechanics Newton. If the speed is constant, there's no change of speed. No change of speed, no force. Yeah, because no change, right? Now there's another level of thinking. You still, there's a different level of languages. Because if you think velocity equal to speed, because you think speed and the velocity same concept. This is in one-dimensional motion, okay, one-dimensional. What's meaning one-dimensional motions? The motion can only happen along the straight line. But this is not a straight line, this is the circle. The speed is not sufficient to describe motions. The scalar. So this means we need to introduce a new language. This language is called a vector. This means we look at the change, not just magnitude change. We also look at direction change. So can you see this process of limit? For me, to name the way, is the limit process. Okay? You need to go to the level such zero appear. I think the great physicist in the 20th century is Dirac. Oh, this is the greatest physicist. He introduced the Dirac functions. This means he using mathematical structure to describe such a phenomena, such that it happen duration zero, zero durations, but magnitude can be infinite. So can you see the mapping between zero and to the infinite? Here, I think Dirac established very rigorous mathematical structure on this. Sorry, I think now is almost, now is 5:43. I actually is only talk about 10% of my talk. Actually, I can talk continuously 10 times longer than this. And I think I have to stop here because now it's 5:43 p.m. And I have only one conclusion here. Yes, it's no way to name the way using our human beings' language, but we can try our best, to find the proper language to name the way. Yeah, I just using Dao De Jing and some words from Dao De Jing and the Gita, and some words from Socrates and Wittgenstein. Actually, I have many examples. I think about 20 examples regarding the some writer, some great writer, some great poet. They use the English, using Chinese to describe the same meanings. I can find one, sorry, I need to, because I cannot memorize this, because I was always remember the great English poet, he using the poem to describe his feelings. I write here. His name is William Blake. Is English poet. He said to see a word in a grain of sand. To see a word in a grain of sand, and heaven in a white flower. Hold infinite in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. Can you see William Blake using his talents in English to describe the same thing, to describe a same thing? Take a look at the key words in his poem. Infinite, eternity, heaven, sand. You know, I think this same meaning has been expressed in the Buddha's words, Buddha's text. I think if you read the Chinese classics, something like that. Luckily today we have one Chinese student, Wu Xin, in the audience. He may know that. I think this word is called, sorry, I cannot memorize, but I can roughly tell, it's better I tell exactly what this Buddha's text. And what he say is, 一沙一世界，一花一天堂. One flower, one word, one leaf, one Buddha. I think this is the word from the Buddha. So I think his, I checked his name is Alanda Bo, because Buddha is in Chinese called Puti. Okay, Buddha Gaya. His words, if trans, because I read it in Chinese, 一沙一世界，一花一天堂. Actually, he mentioned the sand. He mentioned the sand. You know, Buddha, in Chinese interpretation, is heaven like. So one flower, one word, one leaf, one Buddha. I think now I want to conclude my talk today. I have so many things to talk, but unfortunately time is limited. So you can see the limit we are facing. Everything is limited. I cannot continue talking like that. Okay, I think I have to stop here.
Thank you, sir. That was an eye-opening, enlightening session. Now, the forum is open for questions. Students, if you have any questions, you can ask them. You can either post it in the chat box or else you can unmute and ask. Do we have any questions?
So nobody is asking. So can I start some questions?
Sure, sir.
Okay, Professor Huang, that was quite an interesting talk. So I could understand a lot of that because it's mathematical, and then you're talking about the Newtonian mechanics, and some of the language concepts are a bit out of my way, but I could place most of it. But because most of the students here probably are from English language background, so do you think you can name any contemporary Chinese literary personnel that still continued this legacy of the zero and the infinity that you are talking about? So do you have any examples that you can draw from modern day Chinese literature that is possibly influencing the Chinese way of thinking?
I think, thanks, Sarah, for your questions. There are quite a lot of modern Chinese literature. Maybe I still, here, I want to mention another classics. I know you must know Sun Tzu Art of War, right? May I ask the audience? The Chinese, another classics, Sun Tzu Art of War. So this is another classics here. Actually, Sun Tzu Art of War is the application of Dao De Jing in the war. So they treat the war like water. Water means no fighting, accommodation, and he didn't resort to any brutal force. So this is another, I think this is the one example. Second one is Chinese Taiji Kung Fu, Chinese martial arts. They actually pursue nothing. This means they treat life as deductive life, not additive life, because Sarah is expert in additive manufacturing. So the idea of zero, the idea of this limit actually can be applied in our daily life. So many people nowadays pursue so-called adaptive life. They want to accumulate wealth, want to grow bigger. But another way of life is deductive. I think there's some very modern Chinese author. One of them, I think, the guy, he can write English very well. His name, I can give you English name. You can Google him. Many people say he's the best Chinese writer who can write in English. So he wrote a lot of English essays because he was in America. And another one, I think this thinking also affect many other great Chinese author in the modern days. Another one is Lu Xun. I think this emptiness, demolishing everything to establish from zero, affect Chinese May 4 movement. They say to grow a new China, we need to erase, all this Confucianism and Taoism idea, because China has been repeatedly defeated by the Western power. So they say they have to erase Chinese culture to zero, so that a great China can be born from zero. So another author is Hu Shi. I think a more aggressive idea is from Chen Xuantong. I don't know how to write. If you can write English, if I say is Chen Xuantong. Because from my to me, I'm a little bit disappointed because it's a bunch of great authors. They're living in the age when China is humiliated, abused by the power from the West and the East. China has been defeated by Japan for so many times. And actually, many Japan culture, literature are taken from China. Then the people surprised why Japan is so powerful to defeat China so easily. And this, you know, at the turn of the 20th century, these all young people, they are quite young, 1905 or 1915, 1920. I think another one is Chen Duxiu. I think they have one magazine called The New Youth. I don't know if this translation is proper or not. For me, no other culture, no other countries where there are a group of young people, they want to modify, erase its own culture and to build up a new culture, new country. So this influenced many generations of Chinese, including Cultural Revolution, during that time. But many people doesn't realize if you treat Chinese culture, literature as old house, all these people know this old house in and out. But many young generation after them, they have no knowledge of the old house. They just blindly follow the slogan. I think this may be the painful lesson we have learned. As, for example, the Cultural Revolution and many other movements happening in China. Sarah? It's my.
Yep. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So I think there are some others wanting to ask some questions.
I think now is still have time. Dr. Morani.
Yes, if students have any questions, please.
Niranjan, are you here?
Is there any question in the chat box?
I saw a message popping up.
Yeah, can you be quick about it?
Yeah, if any language is deficient to express true truths, then do you think the true truths can be achieved by shedding away our language, which is one of the barrier for culture? I don't think so, because we cannot live without the language. I think Wittgenstein say language is necessary for a game. He treat our life as a game. Without the language, we cannot play games. But we need to persuade using, suitable and the best language to describe the truth. This is why we need a great thinker like philosophers, writers, great writer, great philosophers. Okay. For this part, I memorized a great Indian mathematician, Ramanujam. Sorry, Sarah, I cannot pronounce his name properly.
Yeah, Ramanujan.
Yeah, Ramanujam. Ramanujam produced so fantastic, great mathematical expressions, equations. So when he went to Cambridge, nobody can understand, nobody can prove it. He himself cannot prove it. Then the great mathematician Hardai, I think during that time, the great mathematician UK accepted him as a student. So this is still a myth why Ramanujam can produce such a beautiful, complex, mathematical languages is beyond our human beings' understanding. So I think the language is a barrier. Unfortunately, we're living inside this barrier. We cannot live without these languages because we have a daily life. Life have a different level. Each day when I get up, I'm thinking about bank account balance, I need to buy grocery, pandemic, COVID-19, all these sort of things. So you cannot say we can get rid of languages.
Okay, I'll ask another question. So now that you mentioned Ramanujan, there is another great guy from the same state in India, Jiddu Krishnamurti, and he was also talking about destroying all the old order, throw away all the books, and then you start thinking afresh and the kind of stuff, which is very close to what you were saying. So do you see any kind of similarity? I think you read Krishnamurti as well.
No, I read Chris Martin's book because I read a lot of Zenism, the book on Zenism. Many Zenism master keep it silent. He just allow disciples to understand from the behavior. Sometimes he using very simple words, and if disciple can understand it, they become my follower. They will continue his legacy. Krishnamurti idea is quite close to, for me, because I only read one of his books. It's very close to Taoism and Zenism ideas. He even say, when you see the sunset, if you see the sunset, you're eager to share with your friends the photo, eager to take a photo and share with your friends. This means your brain is polluted, not pure. I fully understand and appreciate his idea. Because this level, only for the people with a high level of Western, I think they can think about that.
Okay.
Yep. Back to you, Dr. Murali.
Yes, is there any other question in the chat box? Do you find any question there from students? In fact, I have. Yes, I have just a very short question. It's not even a question. It's just a kind of a suggestion or your opinion on that, Professor Huang. You said Chinese philosophy is driven by that element of simplicity and emptiness, and that the language goes by the graphic and the poetic and not the symbolic. Our writers unconsciously tilted towards the idea of mysticism, because you were mentioning even Blake, and Blake never hid the element of mysticism in his writings. Now, what is your view to the same? Are these Chinese writers more urged in the direction of the mystical element in their writings?
Yeah, because I don't know what's the definition of mysticism, but I know the Chinese classical literature, I think the peak time is the Song Dynasty. Song Dynasty is the peak time for the poem and painting. If you read the poems and the painting, you can sense, this artist, they try to using graphic image, to manifest the deep thinking, which beyond the words. Song Dynasty is, I believe, always think it's the peak of Chinese culture, but unfortunately, during that time, they are full of the many artists, writers, but very poor prepared soldiers, very, very lousy in fighting. So they are defeated by Mongolians, and the whole group of elites, are eliminated. So Chinese poets tend to use in the natural phenomena to show the deep thinking. So if you read the work, they just describe nature, because for them, the truth is in nature. I think because China is, I read one collection of a Chinese poem. They divided into 4 seasons: summer, autumn, spring, and winter. So they put all these poems, the poems corresponding to different seasons. So different season natural phenomena trigger the feeling inside the heart, the brain of the poet. So when you look at the surface of the words, there's nothing talking about the life or meaning, philosophy, nothing. Just purely the description of natural phenomena. So in this way, they leave the space for the reader to interpret and leave the reader to imagine for their imaginations. Another Chinese great author, very good in this, I need to mention now, because it's come to my mind. is Shen Chongwen. Shen. Because he lived in the southwest of China. I believe Sarah know, you know, the one Xiaoge, I think the Yunnan. No, I think Yunnan provinces. Yunnan Xiaoge. Shen Chongwen, if you read Shen Chongwen's work, you can sense, you know, the peacefulness, serenity, you know, of the natural environment he described. But behind all this natural description, there deep humanity, deep thinking in terms of value of life, deep philosophical thinking. I think maybe it is the way of Chinese writer, Chinese poets take this approach in their writing. They don't say, they tend not to say anything. They tend to minimize, you know, arguments. They tend to minimize or eliminate any subjective claim, subjective argument. They allow the words to flow naturally and allow the reader to understand, to get feelings. I think it's very much like what Dao De Jing says.
Okay, thank you, Professor Huang, for that instant clarification. Well, students, if you have anything to ask, you may do that immediately. Otherwise, I would request Professor Sarath, if you could express your views in a very brief manner, after which we shall move on to the proposal of thanks by ma'am.
I think ma'am, please go ahead. Yeah.
If I may.
Yeah.
This is not so much a thing I have been grappling with. Sir, Professor Lung, I was just wondering if you have read something about existential philosophy, and that there is perhaps no purpose to life, and that there is nothingness at the end. I'm basically thinking of Camus and his myth of Sisyphus here, and how that nothingness that can create anxiety in the existential sense, the very same nothingness can provide silence and solace. And for me, that is a very interesting thing. And do you think it's somewhat cultural? Because I'm also thinking of the space that you talked about. I'm not pronouncing this word right. Is it Liobe? The space that is provided for one to interpret life in our own terms? Because you talked about it with reference to Chinese art, paintings, where a part of the canvas is occupied, but the rest is free. Is that Liobe, sir? Am I saying that word right?
Sorry. Can you? What's the meaning?
My accent is hard to follow. I'll try to slow down. Liobe, is that the word you said, sir? About
Liobe. Oh, Liubai. We call the emptiness, leaving empty space.
Yeah, the empty space, the space for interpretation.
Exactly.
Now, exactly. So Camus also talks about the space for interpretation, but they see it as the burden of meaning of life on the human's shoulders.
Oh,
right?
It's common.
But
Yeah.
But that space, that very same emptiness, how it can be a source of peace and solace. The very same, why it is not interpreted as a burden.
I think this is very subjective, you know, the reader. This means the power of this Liu Bai. They have a different interpretation. Here, you touch the Western philosophy. Actually, I very, very much like the Western philosophy with a strong Zennism, with a strong Oriental philosophy, meaning like Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and Hume. And also read work by American philosopher Sorrow. So I found because of Western philosophy very good in the rational thinking, because the language is much more accurate than Chinese language. To tell the truth, when I read the Tao Te Ching, I read the English version because I like Tao Te Ching translate into English, because English is the accurate language. Chinese, yeah, because based on the feeling, based on the graphic, poetic meaning, they are more romantic and more imaginative, but it's not accurate. So I believe you see these entities have different interpretation. Maybe can be the burden, can be or can be the peace, can be serenity. Yeah, this really, but according to Schopenhauer says suffering of life is actually very, very important. He says suffering of life is really created dynamic life. He used the water as example. If the water without encountering the obstacle, you cannot see any dynamics. So the suffering, I think he even discussed the Greek drama. I don't know your literature. You should know there are some drama just show the miserable part of life. Everything. But Lu Xun has very, very good comments on this. From the suffering, from the miserable things, you can see the real beauty of life, because this opposite image of life. So from this opposite image of life, you can start to appreciate another side of life. So he see the any disaster, any miserable things is the process of breaking the beautiful part. So you observe how a beautiful thing is gradually broken up. From this process, you feel much stronger to appreciate the beauty. So Lu Xun also have another word. You see, the great writer is open his heart, cut his heart to expose to the world.
Yes. So, Priyanka, can you comment?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for patiently clarifying all of our questions. Now, I invite Dr. Sharath to share a few words.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Muraligan, this is a great opportunity for us. So our world is different, and Professor Huang and I, we are from a completely different field of work. So our days are filled with mathematical calculations and then dealing with students, so that are completely different from us. And probably this first interaction, which is probably a unique interaction, so two people, I mean two different sects of people coming from completely different fields of expertise sharing some thoughts. But what I see is Professor Huang, he has some this unique capability to excel in both fields. By the way, he is a very well-known scientist in robotics and artificial intelligence and mathematical modeling. And he's very strong in his mathematical abilities, very strong. So he's the strongest in our university in that field. But at the same time, he can talk for so much of time in a different field like languages, literature, and the relationship between mathematics, science, and languages and literature and the literary people. So some of it may not have gone very clear for you because of the language barrier or because of the way he's expressing his ideas. But maybe we find some other opportunity if you want to have a second interaction with him. I'm sure he is definitely a man of real knowledge and of some great value so that you can take home. And we thank Dr. Murali Gyanam for giving us this opportunity to talk to you. And I only see two or three faces in the front, but there are around 43 people behind the screens. So I would like to have some interaction with them too and want to have some feedback maybe probably through Dr. Murali Ganam. Thanks again for giving this opportunity, and in particular, Professor Huang, thank you. It was a, an inspirational 1 hour that is spent with you. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Ganam.
Yeah, and before we move on to our formal proposal of the vote of thanks by ma'am, I must also say that Professor Sarath is no novice to literature. We have had endless discussions on Hardy or a Hemingway, and he has just played a secondary role here. Anyway, I must thank Professor Hung and Dr. Sarath for making this a great reality. I thought I should say this before we go on to the formal proposal of vote of thanks. Yes, ma'am, you can.
Thank you.
Professors, I now invite my colleague, Dr. Nagarathika, to deliver the formal vote of thanks. Over to you.
Thank you, Priyanka. It is an honor that the opportunity to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the Department of MA English, DG Vaishnav College, fell upon me today. First and foremost, we would like to thank the Secretary of the College, Dr. Shri Ashok Kumar Mundraji, and our Principal, Captain Dr. Santosh Babu, who have supported us to our endeavor. Now, today's talk was a unique experience. To have an engineer ably talk on literature, to have a Chinese gentleman speak on Hindu, Greek, Austrian philosophy, to have Professor Loulin Huang connect the mathematical fact of zero with philosophy. We have seen multiple structures shattered today and multiple divides overcome. Science, philosophy, Chinese, Indian, you name it. We have also come to see the zero is but the infinite. In connection with that, actually, Professor Huang, please allow me to quote from Nirvana Shataka by Adi Shankara, because this resonated so much with me during your talk. Now, this is in Sanskrit. I just follow it with the English meaning. Mano buddha ahankara chittani aham nacha stotra jihve nacha grana netre nacho vyoma vrumir na tejo na vayu chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. I am not the mind, the intellect, the ego, or the memory. I am not the eyes and the tongue. I am not the nose, the eyes. Neither am I the sky, nor the earth, not the fire or the air. I am the form of pure consciousness and bliss. I am the Shiva, the auspiciousness itself. I just go on to quote another stanza. Achaprana sadho navaipancha vayuhu navasapta dhatur navapancha koshaha navakpani pada nachopas vayuhu chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. I am not the prana or even the 5 vital airs, prana, apana, vyana, udana, not the 7 materials, sapta dhatus of the body, skin, muscle, fat, flesh, bone, and marrow, or the 5 sheets of food, prana, intellect, psychological, and bliss. I am not the organ of speech, not the hand, feet, and not even the organs of reproduction or excretion. I am the form of pure consciousness and bliss. I am the Shiva, auspiciousness itself. Now, I come from a family of physicists and engineers, so I was able to listen and understand most of the talk today. And a deep sense of gratitude, sir, and appreciation for you, sir, who in Newtonian terms, you become a force to displace us from our inertia. We have learned a lot today from you, sir. Thank you. Now, we would also like to thank Mr. Sarath Singamdevi. Thank you, sir. We would also like to thank Mr. Sarath Singamdevi for introducing the Professor Hung. Thank you very much, sir. And we'd like to thank the students and friends from across the globe who have joined us today. And finally, they say you don't thank your own, but I would be incomplete in my duty if I did not thank Ms. Priyanka and Ms. Lakshmi, who have become the backbone of our department. And finally, our gratitude is always due to our students, a wonderful group of human beings who keep us driven to deliver our best. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Students, the feedback form's link is in the chat box. Please fill it in. So, sir, we have come to the end of the session.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Professor Hung, and thank you, Sharat, for being with us.
Thank
Yeah.
you all,
Thank you.
sirs. It's a wonderful experience for us too. Thank you, and see you
Yeah,
soon.
yeah, this first time I gave a talk in English to Indian students. I have to say, English is my second language. Looking back, I should have slowed down my talking, because sometimes I talk something, I'm interested, I get excited, and I forgot to slow down. So hopefully, yeah, thanks for your good word. Thanks for your comments. And
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, sir. It was
okay,
a pleasure.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. See you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.